Tunisia, archaeologists have discovered remains of a huge Roman necropolis. More than 1,000 tombs, undisturbed for more than 2,000 years. It's a unique opportunity to explore a missing chapter in the history of the people of this African province. At the time, it was a Roman colony. The Tunisian landscape still bears signs of 5 centuries of Roman presence. As they did with all the provinces they conquered, the Romans introduced their social structure, their values, their lifestyles, their architecture. But they were also influenced by the native cultures. After the fall of Carthage in 146 BC, a vast territory on the southern shore of the Mediterranean became a new province of the empire and was given the name Africa. To the south of Carthage, Puput, known today as Hammamet, acquired the status of a Roman colony in the 2nd century AD. The Latin authors have recounted the historical facts of this story, but they tell us nothing of the lives of the craftsmen, tradesmen, farmers or fishermen who inhabited this province. Today, a door is opening onto the forgotten history of these people. Right in the center of Hammamet, now a renowned holiday resort, experts have discovered a cemetery from the Roman period, covering a zone of about 1 hectare. A team of Tunisian, French, Italian and Japanese archaeologists have been excavating this site since July 1996. Over 1,000 tombs have already been unearthed, ranking Puput as the largest Roman necropolis of Africa to have been discovered so far. But Hammamet continues to promote its tourism, and undeveloped land is getting scarce. For the archaeologists, it's a race against time. Marc Griesheimer specializes in the excavation of Roman necropoli. He has been invited to work on this site by his Tunisian colleague, Aïcha Ben Abed, Director of Research at the National Heritage Institute of Tunisia. For the past 5 years, they have been trying to unearth these precious remains before they're lost to urban growth. Today, these graves, untouched for 20 centuries, crumble under the blows of the researchers' picks. To reach what's inside, one must first destroy what remains of the architectural masonry. Little by little, the archaeologists discover a complex maze where the traces of 3 centuries of history have become completely mixed. These remarkably well-preserved bones belong to several generations of inhabitants of this region. They are fragile and disturbing clues to both individual and collective histories. Fragments of an all but lost memory that only the archaeologists can still revive. But is there enough time to excavate this necropolis before it's finally engulfed by the growing city? Marc Griesheimer is wary.
Ce sont les archives de la terre.
They are the archives of the earth. These have not burned, but they are just as fragile because they are endlessly threatened by the activity of man, and his effect on the land is a matter of fact. In that context, the excavation of a house, a villa, a farm, a public monument, or simply a funerary zone means salvaging, both for the knowledge of present generations as well as for future generations. Scraps, a fraction of history that without these would be irrevocably annihilated.
مبروك بونو ايه ولا كافيه
شو اسمه؟ نسيته الحبل بالحبل
ما تطلعش بالحبل يا ودي مكسر هذا اشتر.
Tomb number 974 reveals the presence of an amphora. Marc Griesheimer thinks that it contains the bones of a child. The collar of the amphora has been sawed through to put a small body inside. The extraction of this strange coffin is a delicate operation.
Don't stir up the sand so we can keep it in one piece. No, put it down, put it down. Don't move it so we can figure out where the head was.
For Marc Griesheimer, the earth that fills this amphora is precious. Every fragment, every clue must be preserved. Though infant mortality was very high during the period, very few children's graves have been discovered here until now. The amphora reveals its contents little by little, but no object appears. The tombs of children are usually richer in offerings than those of adults, but perhaps this one was too young. The bones that emerge little by little already provide an evaluation. The child was between 3 and 8 months old at the time of death. A drawing is made to record this stage in the dig. It will be added to the impressive number of documents and objects that have accumulated since the opening of the site. It's a treasure for researchers like John Shade, who is studying ancient funerary rites at the Collège de France.
The great contribution of a necropolis like Puput can be summed up by 2 points. On the one hand, by the scale of the exploration and the objects that have been discovered, we have such a mass of information that we can speak from a very solid statistical base. We can even solve the little problems of analysis posed by such a tomb, of which there are always badly preserved elements, whereas when you have only 1 or 2, we must be content with saying nothing very precise. But where we have hundreds of them, we can always find the same data and so complete what is missing without risking a mistake. The second great contribution is the knowledge of the funerary rites and the knowledge of death, because the mass of data is such that not only can we easily establish why Puput is a Roman necropolis, as we have found all kinds of rites that refer to the Roman world, but we can also provide all the data that shows what makes Puput an African-style necropolis.
The archaeologists have thus been able to show the coexistence of different funerary practices during the 3 centuries of Roman occupation of this land. In the same enclosure, within the same family, certain individuals were buried and others cremated, as seen here on a bustum, a funeral pyre built on open earth.
We know that it's the same bone, so that's the most important. And it will in any case be easier to put together as it will be in the same bag.
Contrary to what we might imagine, bones that have been burnt, even at very high temperatures, are not reduced to ashes. They do become very fragile.
There are lots, all together in the same place.
Même j'ai essayé de fouiller, hop,
Ça casse tout ça. Voilà. C'est pas grave. De toute façon, on sait déjà que c'est le même fragment.
Even in this condition, Paul Bellet can still extract precious information from these. Since the 1980s, the analysis of burnt bones and wood carbon has opened new fields of investigation for archaeology. It allows us to understand more precisely the stages and rites of cremation. We are even able to reconstruct the composition and structure of a funeral pyre.
We still have the network of the wood, we still have pieces here from the initial small branches.
An even finer observation under an electron microscope reveals the kinds of wood that were used. They used olive wood, juniper, cistus gum, and pine nut. This approach also makes it possible to know, after 2,000 years, the temperature and the length of time the pyre burned, and even whether it was stoked during the cremation. These clues are highly valuable in reconstructing the way the rites were conducted. "500 meters away from the site, work continues late into the night. The quantity of the materials that have been unearthed from this necropolis is considerable. Each night, the archaeologists have to document, draw, and classify their findings of the day. For the moment, any ceramic fragment is considered to be a potential clue. Only later will it take its place in the general scheme. Thanks to this meticulous work, the archaeologists begin to decipher the complex structure of the necropolis. In enclosures that are clearly limited by walls, the tombs, either mason-lined or simply dug out of the earth, are found atop one another, sometimes completely entangled, occupying every inch of available space several meters deep, and sometimes at the deepest levels, original architecture can be found. In the tomb number 1645, once again, amphorae appear. But this time, they seem to be part of the grave structure itself. Laid side by side at the bottom of the tomb, they form a kind of shelter over the burial trench, replacing the wooden planks or flagstones generally used. Whether whole or in pieces, these amphorae are a rich source of information for the scientists. Everything is saved. These fragments have been collected in such great numbers that 2 additional warehouses had to be built. The quantity and variety of uses of the amphorae that have been brought to light here is one of the interesting things about this site. But how can we account for their presence in such great numbers in a necropolis?
When we're speaking of cemeteries, we think generally of very clean, very pretty mausoleums, sarcophagi that are more or less luxurious. But not everyone has been buried in such luxurious or pretty artifacts. And we should remember that there were poorer people who used whatever they had for burials, a few planks, or sometimes simply a ditch or a shroud, or something very original, like amphora. Amphora are generally used only once and thrown away. But here we find amphora almost everywhere that have been cut in two, adapted in different ways to be used as coffins for children but also for adults. I would say that, unfortunately, The majority of the people had to be buried in these recycled amphora.
Devaient se faire enterrer dans ces emballages perdus qu'étaient les amphores.
Oui, parce qu'elle a été attaquée par un produit. C'est pas possible qu'elle parte comme ça. C'est l'humidité et le produit.
The necropolis of Hammamet contains the largest number of amphorae from the Roman period found on land to date. The teams of Aïcha ben Abed and Marc Griesheimer have recovered more than 200 objects intact. As for shards, they number in the tens of thousands. These earthenware receptacles could hold between 60 and 80 litres. They were used for transporting foodstuffs from one end of the empire to the other. Wine, oil, or garum, a fish-based condiment that the Romans adored. The amphorae that were discovered are for the most part of African origin. It's an important clue in evaluating the commercial role of the city of Puput in the region and within the empire. Michel Bonifay and Tomo Mukai have just arrived at the site. They are ceremologists and often join the team for brief periods to perform a preliminary analysis of the amphorae. For them, the storehouses of the excavation are full of riddles to be solved. By comparing the shapes, signatures, or stamps of the manufacturers, they are able to establish the origin of each amphora: African, Gallic, Iberian, or Italic. But in order to know more, they have to call upon other specialists. Claudio Capelli is a geologist. He works in a laboratory in Genoa. These few samples will allow him to study the composition of the clay used to make the amphorae. The clues are found at the heart of the material itself. The mineral composition, the colors, the shape and size of the angular or round inclusions all tell the story of the creation of these amphorae. Its greater or lesser degree of kaolin, its richness in iron or quartz, signals the exact geographic origin of the clay used by the potter. In identifying the places these amphorae were produced, one can also establish which regions exported the foodstuffs they contained. What is clear is the richness of the exchanges destined for the Gulf of Hammamet. But only a minute part of the collected material has been analyzed yet. For hours on end, Tomo classes and numbers the 55,000 fragments unearthed from the necropolis up till now. It's the work of an ant, slow, methodical, at times fastidious, but it's the foundation upon which the discoveries of tomorrow can depend. Time takes on a different dimension here. These fragments are more than 2,000 years old, and their detailed analysis will undoubtedly require several years of work. It's the price to pay for the knowledge of our past. In the 2nd century AD, this African province was called Byzacena. Its cities were then given the status of colonies. It was a privilege that shows the interest Rome had in this expanding agricultural region that supplied the city with its grain and olives. The immense new amphitheatre built in El Jem, 150 kilometers south of Carthage, was proof of this new status. Modelled on the Colosseum in Rome, it could hold up to 12,000 spectators. They came here to watch the gladiators or to celebrate the emperor. Inspired by archaeological research, the watercolours of Jean-Claude Gaulvin bring to life the know-how of thousands of anonymous workers, the masons, carpenters and craftsmen who built the amphitheatre of El Jem, as well as the splendid Roman city of Carthage. Built on the ruins of the ancient Punic city, it is above all the work of these people of northern Africa that the Roman historians have omitted from their writings. These monuments were the symbols of the power of Rome, but their remains also bear witness to the history of this population, whose memory the excavations of the Puput necropolis are bringing back to life.
It's the people from the middle and lower classes who built these walls, these cities. They made this part of Africa prosperous. And they have been laid in this earth with ritual, with a certain grandeur, each one of them.
Avec une certaine grandeur, tous. Et moi, je suis très heureuse de les faire revivre.
And I'm very happy to revive their memory and to participate in bringing individuals into the history of this part of my country.
Individus humains de cette partie de mon pays.
Paul and Merson have been excavating tomb number 1174 since dawn. After 3 hours of digging, fragments of metal appear.
Apparently it's been exposed to fire, so it has a rather bizarre shape. It's been deformed. You can see little balls there, little pearls.
An object was burned with the body. Under the effect of the heat, the metal has melted and formed a compact mass, difficult to identify.
We can clearly see the greenish aspect of bronze.
They are perhaps the remains of a necklace, which makes the researchers think that this was a woman's grave. But other fragments appear. The puzzle becomes more complex.
That's bronze there, I would think. But that's something flat, something else. Perhaps another object that was laid here. That's a bone, and that's a piece of coal.
Elles sont tellement petites, elles vont passer dans le tamis. Mais on va carrément le
They're
mettre
so small that they will go through the sifter. We're going to just put them in a bag and I'll sort them. There's something there, I can't quite... It has a very flat surface. Can you see that? What could it be?
Tieni, pensa. Très, très fragile.
Very, very fragile. Because if I rub it too strongly, it comes off with the brush. I've already taken a few fragments, you see. It's very, very fine. Is it a mirror?
A mirror made of bronze, the sixth found in this necropolis. A mirror, a necklace. These personal objects do seem to have accompanied a woman on her final voyage. The archaeologists find jewels, weaving weights, earthenware statuettes, lamps. Small things that allow us a glimpse into the intimate lives of the men and women buried here.
C'est à toi là. Tu vas aller là.
The scarcity of metal offerings confirms that the tombs in this part of the necropolis belong to modest people. A little further away, the surprising discovery of colors brings life to this cemetery. The masonry casing of this tomb reveals traces of ancient pigments. Cleared of its ochre coating, the grave appears saturated with red and violet. For the researchers, these colors immediately evoke Roman funerary iconography. In garlands or buds, flowers are everywhere. Painted here on the exterior of the tomb, they're designed to carry on the funeral ritual between visits of the family members.
First, the flower can be the equivalent of blood. There are interpretations of this sort. So offering flowers to the dead is in a sense almost like a metaphoric sacrifice where an animal would be immolated in honor of the deceased. It is also a decorative element for banquets, where floral wreaths are customary. During the celebration of a banquet, one lies down and eats a first course of meat, and during the second course, wreaths are distributed. People crown themselves with flowers, perfume themselves, drink and chat. It is time for exchange, poetry, song, and of course drinking. Because Roman funerary rites, beyond cremation and burial, often revolve around food.
Jean-Marie Gassin is an architect, but he is also a sketch artist. He is trying here to recreate the world of the necropolis as it probably was 2,000 years ago. His experience allows him to quickly identify remains and to give shape to these monuments worn down by the centuries. Based on clues preserved on site along with historical data, these drawings are just a personal interpretation intended to stimulate the imagination and to suggest new paths of research. This very colorful aspect of the tombs marks a boundary
between what is of this world, which is colored, and what is beyond, which is dark, humid, swampy. There is a whole series of terms that describe this beyond, this underworld where the deceased are, which is not much fun to live in nor easy to bear. The meaning of these colors is that you should enjoy life while you still can, because there is nothing better than life.
Today, the excavation of a tomb confronts the archaeologists with a striking image of death. A strange coffin, a mask placed on top of an amphora mimicking the body of the deceased. Perhaps a reproduction of the features of the person that is buried here. But under this mask lies another, and this one is broken. Many such masks have been found in Puput. Placed on the face of the deceased, they often represent the god Hermes, the conveyor of souls, the god who accompanies them toward the underworld. By entrusting their dead to him, the family is assured that they will not come back to haunt the world of the living. We know very little about the history of these earthenware masks, which are extremely rare in the Roman world. Some, like this child's mask, are broken. Someone threw it into the tomb, deliberately scattering the pieces to the four corners. A gesture that undoubtedly symbolizes the obliteration of this loved one's identity at the moment of death. The dig at Puput has been underway for 5 years. Starting the workday each morning between 6 and 7 o'clock on site has become a kind of ritual for the team. But beneath this apparent tranquility, everyone is conscious of the passing time and of the quantity of work that remains to be done before these grounds are returned to their owners. Exploration of a single tomb represents almost a full day's work, from the first blows of the pickaxe to the final drawings. To understand the funeral rites, one must in a sense reverse the stages of the burial process step by step. First, they must carefully dismantle the masonry casing, built after the funeral ceremony, on top of the tumulus, covering the dead. The mortar might contain precious shards of ceramic that could help to date the structure. After a few hours, the first offerings appear on the side where the deceased's head must lie. Objects the family has placed on the tumulus at the moment of the burial. On this tomb numbered 1178, a vase has been deliberately turned upside down and broken. It's a ritual gesture. In ancient time, the funeral banquet was shared between men and gods, the family and the dead. The part of the divine and that of the dead were then symbolically destroyed. 2 oil lamps now emerge out of the earth that surrounds this vase. One of them is marked with a stamp. It will allow the identification of the potter or of the workshop where it was made. It was clearly produced in Africa. In turning over the second one, Marc Griesheimer discovers that it's decorated with a representation of the goddess Africa, the personification of the province. Her image appears frequently on the numerous lamps found in the necropolis. Anthropologist Paul Bellet is a specialist in the study of burnt bones. His laboratory has developed a method of applying techniques of field excavations to funerary urns. This approach has already proved efficient in the excavations of Alexandria. It's a micro-excavation, allowing the anthropologist to move through the bone fragments layer by layer from top to bottom.
So, enclosure 55, mausoleum 14, urn number 8. We're 150 millimeters below the top level. And we have a fragment of the right side of the mandible with the collar and the condyle. We have a fragment of bone of the carpus, a fragment of the diaphysis of the humerus, a fragment of the head of the humerus.
Authorized to take some of the bones to France for a more in-depth study, Paul Bellet continues his work in Draguignan. In certain urns, he has observed that the arrangement of the bones respected the anatomical order of the skeleton from head to foot. In other cases, the bones had been regrouped in pairs. Sometimes the remains of several individuals can even be found in a single urn. During an analysis of this type, the bone residue can supply astonishing clues. Their color, for example, can provide information about the temperature of the pyre, how long it burned, and whether or not the fire was stoked by an attendant. When reconstructing an entire skeleton, the deformation of certain bones can even supply precise information about the structure of the pyre itself. The anthropologist can also tell the sex and age of the individual at the moment of death. Here, it was a young woman of about 24 who was probably pregnant. Paul Bellet has found a few bone fragments of a fetus in the urn. In the necropolis of Poput, simple burial seems to have been the most common funerary rite. So why is it that within the same enclosure, the two rites coexisted for several centuries? A matter of family traditions, perhaps, or money, or perhaps, just like today, a choice left to each individual. Only children seem to have been systematically buried. In the tombs and alleys that border the enclosure, the archaeologists have discovered some coins. A small number, barely 200, for more than 1,000 graves excavated. Some of them have been burned with the deceased. The fire has made it almost impossible to identify them. Others, on the other hand, have allowed the coin expert Jean-Luc Denier to establish that they were no longer in circulation at the time they were placed in the tomb. A symbolic offering that was affordable for a population of modest means. In exploring this poor section of the necropolis, the archaeologists continue to bring simple objects to light. Broken crockery, earthenware statuettes, vases and many lamps. The lamps seem to have been the most frequent offering. Often decorated with scenes from Roman mythology, they bear witness to the spread of the culture of the empire in this region of Africa. More than 1,000 have been found to date.
Beaucoup de tombes.
Many of the tombs are archaeologically intact.
Et pour ces sépultures intactes,
on these tombs, there is no possible place for a marble inscription, a painted inscription, or a simple graffito.
Ou simplement un graffito. Ce qui signifie que nous sommes,
which means that we are, for the most part, confronted with a population that either didn't have access to writing or didn't want to use writing to perpetuate a memory. On the other hand, it is completely different from what happened at the same period in other parts of Africa, where funerary epigraphy is omnipresent. Here, no. In this zone of the necropolis, there are very few epigraphic fragments. Memory was preserved another way. It was the survivors of the family who brought objects. They were placed, there were rites, gestures were carried out, on and around the tomb, so they didn't need to write.
It's only through ritual gestures that the memory of the deceased is carried on. There is almost nothing to distinguish one tomb from another. But in this anonymous graveyard, the archaeologists have discovered an exception. Above the masonry casement of certain tombs, an earthenware tube seems to communicate directly with the interior of the grave. According to Roman tradition, at the time of the funeral, the family symbolically took leave of the deceased. This was accomplished with a sacrifice of food shared with the dead over the tomb. During these ceremonies, libations of wine were offered to the deceased through this tube. Thus, they consumed their part of the sacrifice in a very realistic way. Each year, during the Festival of the Dead and for birthdays, the same ritual was repeated to sustain the memory of the dead. In 5 years, the archaeologists have found only 4 libation tombs. But today, the discovery of a 5th tomb captures the attention of the whole team. They are going to try to unearth intact this means of communicating with the dead put in place 2,000 years ago. At the end of the conduit that linked it to the outside world, the urn finally appears. Aïcha Ben Abed wanted her archaeology students in Tunis to participate in this exceptional moment. It's a unique opportunity to demonstrate the importance of this type of dig that shows how ancient populations really lived. The archaeologists wonder about the origins of the deceased buried in this libation tomb. Was it a colonist observing Roman rites, or an African conquered by Romanization? Maybe the answer lies in the construction technique, the masonry, or in the bones contained in the urn.
Avec un... Ça, c'est une pierre complète.
Dans la maçonnerie,
Oui, mais regarde, ça adhère pas trop quand même au...
Parce que regarde, ça bouge.
Because look, it moves. If you take the stone away that holds the tube, it comes off completely. You'll have all the rest tumbling down. Look, it makes it move.
The extraction of the artifact is successful, and it will join the collection of pieces gathered over the past 5 years. Aïcha Ben Abed plans to present them to the public in a museum on the site of the discovery itself. Marc Griesheimer has just learned that surveys in the neighboring olive grove have revealed the existence of tombs from the same period. Ceramic shards and bits of masonry appear on the surface over several hundred meters. The necropolis is probably much larger than originally thought. On the other side of the road, about 500 meters away, are remains of a mausoleum just brought to light by a new dig. Based on the evidence, the cemetery also extends under the buildings of the modern city. This large Roman necropolis of Africa is in fact 3 or 4 times larger than the archaeologists imagined. The entire necropolis could ultimately measure more than 7 hectares, but a large part of it is already lost under existing buildings. With this news, the dig comes to a close. Marc Griesheimer and Aïcha Ben Abed hope to at least have time enough during their next campaigns to complete their exploration of this hectare that has been miraculously preserved. The enormous quantity of rough documentation that has already been accumulated during the past 5 years is priceless. It will continue to support research in different fields long after these lands are restored to their owners. The necropolis of Hammamet now constitutes a key reference for studying the life and funeral practices of the inhabitants of Roman Africa of the 1st centuries AD. But the most moving treasures of Hammamet are these thousands of objects that were buried by the inhabitants of ancient Puput next to their dead. Each one of them was carefully chosen to accompany a loved one on his last journey. They offer us a fleeting look at life in the Roman colonies. Some of these trinkets and everyday objects seem to have been intimately linked to the activities, tastes, and lives of the men and women who are buried here. Other objects, like the many oil lamps or mortuary masks, undoubtedly played a symbolic role in funerary rites. The centuries have eroded their differences, obscured their meanings, but their discovery today turns each one of these modest offerings into a precious testimony. They are the only traces that remain of a population who, without them, would have certainly slipped into oblivion.